ADP. Alrighty. Welcome everybody. Customer Success Show. Today, we're doing a hiring manager Q&A. What number is this? I can't remember. Hold on. Let me see. It's number 11. That's right. Although we've had way more than 11 calls. We just started numbering them, I guess, 11 shows ago. So, welcome. It's going to be another fun show. Got some familiar faces and some new ones. Real quick, if you haven't signed up for Success Panda, we have free accounts. If this fits who you are, if you're a hiring manager who's willing to just give insights to job seekers, if you're looking for a mentor or looking to be mentored or you're looking to network, Success Panda also has mock interviews that you can self-organize. So head over there, check it out, create your free account. And what makes it different is people have to buy little matches, have microtransactions. So when if you're a hiring manager, someone reaches out to you, they paid a microtransaction, they have skin in the game. They're not just spamming you. So a little bit different platform, and it's growing every week. So head over and create a free account and check it out. All right, so let's invite our panel on. So we want to welcome to the stage Melissa, Chris, and Rosalind. Hello, panel. How's everyone? Good. So let's do our intros. And on my screen, beauties before the beast. So, we'll do Melissa, then Rosalind, then Chris. That way in intro. So, Melissa, you want to start us off?
Yes, great. Thank you for having me. I'm Melissa Garcia. I am a customer success leader and mentor, currently leading our member success team at Chief. We're a network for executive women. I'm based in New York, and something that I do for fun, this is probably basic, but I love trying new restaurants. I love food, and so you can always find me going to a new place in New York. So if any locals have recommendations, let me know. But excited to be here. I'll pass it to Rosalind.
Thanks. And Melissa, I'm a native New Yorker, so I'll definitely send you some restaurant recommendations. Okay, excellent. We have stuff to talk about after this.
Yes.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rosalind Corrado. I'm the head of global customer success at Sage. I've spent the last decade working in customer success. Absolutely love this field. And interestingly, worked at 2 startups, both of which were acquired, and both really valued customer success. But I started my career in corporate finance and M&A and spent most of my career there before I pivoted here. Excited to be here to talk about hiring. And I'll hand it off to Chris.
Awesome. Thanks, Rosalind. My name's Chris Rule. I've done a few of these before, but I recently transitioned to be the head of customer success at a company called Turno. Definitely invite you to take a look at them. We do essentially a marketplace and SaaS for Airbnb turnovers, connecting cleaners with maintenance. Cleaners with hosts and maintenance. So really cool platform there. I've been in customer success for same with Rosalind, a better part of a decade. Different operations, customer success, onboarding, support. Mostly joining businesses that are about to scale or trying to scale up and in those areas. So I tend to be building out a lot of these functions at different places that I go. And then before that, I spent almost a decade in hospitality. So that's sort of where I made my transition into tech. So kind of a fun fact about myself, I guess, just coming off of Halloween, which was yesterday. I'm a huge sort of Halloween and I guess just like decorating nut. So we have it's one of my favorite nights. I have a ton of decorations on the outside of the house. We do like an entire haunted porch, and our neighborhood is really, it's kind of quaint. We have about 100 houses that are all kind of nearby each other. So we probably get 300 to 400 trick-or-treaters and just kind of go through the haunted place, and I play music and just love that kind of like atmosphere and kind of serving the community in that sense. And so just coming off of a very sort of a high out of one of my favorite nights of the year. So.
That's cool. So pictures or it didn't happen, Chris? We want to see the pictures.
Oh, I have video.
Right.
Are you kidding me?
Okay, because I don't know if you guys know who Brittany Casey is, but she's pretty. She works at DocuSign and she's like super into Halloween. I saw her at Churn Zero, but yeah, she's like Brittany, if you see this, your house was like literally, I don't, where do you store all that? That's the thing. It's like, you must have massive storage for just all these Halloween decorations, because this is commitment. I mean, I put out a pumpkin, maybe a little, jack-o'-lantern, things like that. And I'm like, okay, I'm good. But people go on.
I think we're up to like 14 bins just for Halloween. So
yeah,
basements in Colorado, storage in the garage. That's where we go.
There you go. That's cool. And then Rosalind was in finance and M&A, and she had to be recovering from that. So she's like, I need to go. I need to go work with people.
A very fun fact or interesting thing too. So I'm a New Yorker, as I mentioned, and a big Yankees fan. So kind of recovering from the series this week. Melissa, sounds like you are too.
Yeah, we're a little bit in mourning over here, but we did our best, Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, at least there's a lot of things. The Jets somehow won. So are you guys Jets fans?
Giants.
Giants. Oh, okay. Sad topic. Never mind. Let's just move on from that.
New York sports fans, it's a hard journey to take, I think. So we can move on.
Yeah. Cool. Alrighty. So just for the audience watching, again, feel free to send in a question if you want. You can use the chat on LinkedIn, and then we can read your question. We have people that sent in questions, but if you want to send one in, we will try to integrate that into the show. So what brings us here together, right, is every month we always want to have these on Success Panda. We have these hiring manager Q&As, because I get tons and tons of people reach out to me all the time because they want to know different topics about, and we'll cover all these, right, from resumes to networking to even building rapport, right? So a lot of people have a lot of questions. So all three of you are quite senior in the space, and you're doing a great service by sharing your insights with the community, because a lot of people get a lot of value out of just hearing the different perspectives. So first off, I want to bring up the question, and this is, there's no right or wrong answer, but how would you assess this job market, and then what are you seeing right now? So I don't know if anyone wants to go first, and then we'll just do round robin, and then we'll move on to the next question. But whoever wants to go first.
This is a tough one, so I'm happy to start first, and then folks can build from there, Brad.
Okay.
I mean, so it's tough, right? And I think you alluded to the jobs report that recently came out as well, right? When we were chatting before this. So I think we see two different sides of this. Part of it is overall, it feels like it's really rough. However, there's also a lot of organizations that are hiring actively, right? And so I think it just depends on what industry you're looking to lean into. In general, though, I think when organizations, which many of them are approaching Q4, purses tend to tighten a little bit, and headcount tends to tighten also. And so I almost think that this period's a little bit of wait and see, and then hopefully, come the new year, you'll start to see a resurgence in hiring, right? So this year I think is typical in terms of the cycle of hiring as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Melissa, Chris, what are you all seeing?
I can chime in. I think I agree with you. I almost see this time period as a reset for yourself, and a time to kind of reflect and get your ducks in a row, so to speak, as you think about what you want for next year. So there might not be as much coming out in terms of new jobs or new hires, or people's budgets aren't set yet for 2025. But I think you can definitely use it as an opportunity to assess what you will do in 2025. Get yourself ready, get your documents in order, think about what you're looking for, and be able to be really intentional in this period as we look to the next year.
I think the only thing I'll add to that is, and again, this is sort of purely anecdotal. Like I don't know if I have like data or anything to back this up, but there's been a lot of, sort of year and a half, 2 years ago, a lot of cuts in the customer success side across the board in tech. But I think customer success was hit kind of pretty hard. I think there's just a lot of like very clear ROI stuff that executives were looking for. And so maybe a sales team or a product team or an engineer team may have been spared, where customer success was not. But I'm starting to see more and more, like, I don't know, we'll call it like director level or executive level customer success roles popping up, which typically is an indicator that like either these companies have like sort of rounded the turn on some of their profitability goals and are like now realizing like, oh wow, we completely are not taking care of the customer base that we essentially cut before, and we're ready to bring back some more vision and energy around that at the sort of higher level. And then that then tends to trickle down into some newer roles, at least in theory. So I agree there's timing there, right? Which is probably we're hiring these higher level director, VP level roles to start planning for 2025, and then hopefully early next year budgets are set and there's room for maybe some new CSM level heads into these. That's just purely anecdotal, but I have seen a lot more executive level customer success roles popping up than I've seen in the past sort of year and a half, 2 years, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like in September specifically and throughout October, I felt like I saw, and I'm pretty plugged into the community, and people posting jobs usually show up on my timeline, right? A lot more jobs being posted, right? People hiring for 2025. And to your point, Chris, yeah, more director, more senior level jobs too, I feel like I've seen. So I agree.
And cheat sheet on LinkedIn, I don't know if you're all aware, but if you like follow a specific type of role, you can get a weekly email that tells you, oh, there was a 50% increase in people hiring for VP of customer success in the last week, right? So you can also see when more of those roles are being posted.
Right. Yeah, maybe we'll have to have you back and live demo the cheat sheet. So or you can make a link and send it in the other one. No, yeah, which is good. Which is good. You know, something that you alluded to as a follow-up kind of question, and I think a good point of discussion is you mentioned how, you know, over the past, we'll say year and a half. Well, let's back up before that. So in like 2019 to 2021, a little bit, half of that year, so much was about like, you know, those were the good times. Jobs were plentiful. There's so many opportunities. People were well funded, and then it shifted from growth to profitability. So now more CS teams are reporting under sales leaders, and they're having more heavy commercial responsibilities. And you know, it's like the wave. And I think that I've mentioned this before, but at the beginning of this year, on the SaaStr podcast, Jason Lemkins, who he's the founder of SaaStr, was talking about he had Nick Meta on from Gainsight, and they made a joke at the beginning of their call. He's like, "Hey Nick, could I get a little bit more customer success, you know, and a little less sales?" Because he was making the observation that although they don't have a million tools, like every CSM's trying to sell them something, you know, every time they get on a call. And I feel like that's kind of cyclical, right? Where it's kind of like, okay, we're worried about profitability, we're extension of a sales arm, we're worried about renewals and expansion, which is going to be the topic next week on this call. But do you feel like it's kind of like shifting back because we've gone a full year of, we'll just say, CSMs being more intentional about revenue and maybe not enough headcount to go around to focus on, we'll say, the success and adoption? I mean, that's just, I don't know. What's your perspective from where you stand?
Yeah, I can start. Or go ahead.
No, go ahead, Chris. I'll
Okay.
go.
I was gonna say, I like I've said that on this call before. Like, I think if you are a customer success leader that doesn't have a like line on revenue, or like and sort of a goal against revenue or something along those lines, you're probably going to be on the chopping block pretty quickly when things go to, you know, sort of go into like, hey, we need profitability. So like, I think at the end of the day, like the core functionality of a customer success team or is going to be revenue outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
To your point, Brad, I think the place where if you're not a strong customer success leader and you don't know how to communicate how like the success of a customer on our platform and adoption and all these other things are leading indicators of that revenue, and you're just looking at like upsells, right? Then that's what your executive team is going to go to, right? They're going to be like, sell more stuff to our existing customers, and that will drive more revenue, versus deeply understand our customers, retain them, understand the value of retaining them. And then when the timing is right for that customer, we will introduce other products that drive more value to their business. If you're not good at like selling that internally, then yeah, you're going to just get stuck in this cyclical, like CSMs go out there and be sort of a salesperson and try to sell something that customers may or may not need just to hit a number.
Yeah, Chris, you make such a good point. I was going to go down the same path of like, I think that is why we're seeing a lot of that, because we know that CS teams need to be tied to revenue now to prove that they need to be part of the business, frankly, right? That's something that is just the reality for where we are right now in the world. And so I think it's a good thing for us because we have struggled in the past, I think, as CS leaders and CS teams to prove how we are tied to revenue. And so now that that is expected a lot more, I actually think it's a good thing and shows the value of CS in a way that maybe we struggled a little bit to do in the past. But to Chris's point, I do think there is that relationship between the leading indicators and the relationship to actual retention that is really important and something that we're going to see continue to be something we have to get right and really understand about our customers and our business. And so that I think I see increasingly becoming more and more important to make that work, and working with our cross-functional teams, working with our data teams to really connect those dots and have that data. And to Chris's point, sell it right to your leadership team internally as well, because at the end of the day, that's what we all need to stay in this business, right? And continue to expand our teams or scale our teams or keep our teams in the current climate. So Rosalind, I'm curious your thoughts as well.
Yeah, actually, Melissa, I wanted to build off of what you just said, because I think where you start to see more of that pressure as treating it as a sales function more than what we know and love as in customer success is, when you're standing up a program or redesigning it and you haven't nailed that formula of if a customer sees value, the renewal is a no-brainer, the growth is a no-brainer, right? Because they're on that path. If that hasn't been established and is clearly laid out, then you start to see this swing back to account management, right? Like old school, what was done with customer accounts versus, what we all know and love and want to see, which is like customers see value, they love the product, they're going to stick around. And so that's where I think I start to see more of that, like sales kind of owning more of this function, more so than what we know as customer success. And it's cyclical, right? So when times are tough, when customers start to churn, even if it's macroeconomic driven, panic happens, right? And then everyone gets into the accounts, everyone wants to get into the numbers. And so that's when I think you also start to see that shift in ownership.
This is interesting because, I mean, I am a romantic and idealist at heart. And I am very much like, I understand the whole like revenue thing, right? I understand, like, and I agree with it. It's not that I disagree with what's been said, but I feel like, I don't know, I've seen too much. I've been on too many calls where it's you're meeting with a client and you got the sales guy on there, you got your CSM on there, you got your professional service person on there, you got your solution engineer on this call. You got like 5 people on this customer call. And this is like particularly notorious with what I call dinosaur companies, like these huge companies have lots of people. And then this poor customer is like onboarding, and then they're like, and we're all kind of like, hey, we need to be relevant and we need to make sure that we're providing value. And I don't know. I feel like there always needs to be some person who is not commercially motivated to where, because as soon as they find out you're commercially motivated to get more money out of them, because everyone's BS meter is very good, right? It's very, very good. And they know when you want to get money out of them, right? And so we need at least one person with the customer who can be like, hey, you can tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly. And, I'm not going to penalize you, or I'm not going to tell my salesperson or my product team or whatever. Like, you need to be close to the customer so you can actually know what they're thinking. And in my experience, there's not a whole lot of that going on. And I feel like that's an attack vector for companies that want to have that, I don't know, that non-commercially motivated actor that's playing in that space. So am I wrong? I mean, you can tell me I'm wrong. I won't cry.
No, I think we all agree with you. I think you're talking about the purest form, right, of customer success, which is I only care about doing good for my customer. And you're right, that ideal state doesn't always happen, especially in this climate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other side too is like, yes, number one, right? Very heavy profitability pressures on nearly every business, right? But I think we're also in a world where technology moves so fast, right? Like it's anybody can create any business out of their garage these days, right? And in a remote work environment, and so exactly right. So like there's just a lot more commoditization of a lot of products out there,
Yeah.
and so it's hard, right? You want to make sure that your success and that you're driving success for that customer, but there's potentially two or three other companies out there that can do a very similar thing to you. And so, at the end of the day, you have to make sure that you're doing what's right for the customer, but you also have to make sure that you're doing what's right for your current business as well, right? To make sure that you can survive across what could be it tends to be very commoditized, products these days. It's hard to
Great
it's hard to
point.
find something that doesn't have like similarity. Like customer success platforms are a great example. How many of those are out there now, right? It used to be one or two, and now it's there's 10,
Yeah.
15. I get
And I
a
know
ping
I know
every other
too
week.
that are seeking additional funding. They're like
Right,
pure startups. They're seed
right,
companies who want to get in the CSP
right,
space. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's so interesting to see that. I think you're totally right, Chris, and I think Rosalind, you're right too. You're both correct on all sides here because it's like Brad, you're also right. Like
Oh, okay.
Brad's not right. Brad's not right.
all
Brad's not
right.
wrong.
Stop, Liver.
I think
No.
that,
All right, let's see. Melissa not coming back on the show. Strike that.
I think you all make really good points, but I think like there is a balance, which is like,
Yeah.
you can't, I think especially to take it back to hiring, I think like I am looking at hiring for my team, you kind of have to have the balance of both. Like you have to be able to understand that you're in CS because it is a relationship building
Mm.
role and it's going to be important to have those skills. And Brad, to your point, your customers should trust you. You want to hear like real feedback from them. You don't want them to feel like you don't have that relationship built. And so I think those skills are still really important. We're just forgetting about them a little because of the state of the world. But I think if you can marry the two, like when I'm looking for team members for our team, that is something that if you can figure out both and explain to me, how you manage the priorities of the business and the priorities of your customer, that's like gold, right? If you can show me how you do that and give examples, I think that really shows that you're a strong candidate. Just take it back to the hiring piece of it. But
Yeah, I mean, marry the two. It makes me think of the Jack Black quote of like, I want to have a sexy body, but I also love tacos. I mean,
it's hard, right? It's a hard thing to do.
yeah. All right. So that was all great input. I mean, a lot of good things there. Let's pull on this thread of building relationships because hey, you're a job seeker right now. I would say that given the state of the market, there are companies that are hiring. There are positions to be had. So, I have a small little coaching practice that I do, and I always make sure I make room for like people because the number one thing, like I'm building a product, building success pan, it's like pressing buttons, doing technical work. But what really, really makes me go is being able to affect people's lives in a positive way and to actually help them, right? And I hope that comes through every time that I do. But one of the things that I always talk about when people are looking for a job is the ability to build rapport. So I'm going to ask this open-ended question. So you can use this how do you build rapport quickly question in either a networking context, someone reaches out to you, or in an actual, you're interviewing someone. But what's something that one or two takeaways that you have experienced where you feel like people are building rapport quickly with you, and then I'll write it down. So in case I never do get a job from you one day, I'll have the answer.
So this is networking, events, LinkedIn.
Yeah, just how do you think how do people build rapport with you quickly?
I think for me, it starts with a phrase that I've said is one of the most important aspects of a customer success. Anybody in customer success, it's genuine curiosity, right? Like if you are actually genuinely curious about my journey, my path, who I am, right? Like and what makes me tick and how I think about the world and how I think about certain aspects, we're going to be able to build rapport pretty quickly, right? Because I like to talk about myself. I like to talk about my journey. I like to talk about those things, right? That's just welcome to being a human.
Mhm.
And so the way you get to that is not just by like surface level curiosity, by having like chat gpt send you a bunch of what questions should I ask type of thing. It's really wanting to get to know what makes that person tick. And it's saying you can use the same thing with customers. What makes that person's business tick, and how did they get into it, and what are their challenges, and really wanting to know that. It's the same thing with any person, right? It's just that genuine connection of like being curious about their experience in their life and their work and whatever else is relevant to that conversation, and continuing to pull out those threads. It's a skill that it's hard to learn. And a lot of people just have it naturally, just based on some of their experiences in their own lives. And so that it kind of comes a little easier to certain folks than others, but it is something you can learn and work on. And those are the things that come through in interviews big time, and
Mhm.
come through in networking things big time. It's not about what you can do for me. It's about what do you want to know about me, right? Like that tends to drive a little bit more of like the engagement from my end.
Cool.
And to tie that into something else, because Chris, I thought that was fantastic, and we were all nodding our heads in agreement.
Yeah.
Is authenticity, right? So if you're
Mhm.
at a networking event, um, it's almost like people have this like formula and how they think they need to interact with you, right? And they like have sometimes like no, they have to check the box and meet 5 people or 10 people and like begrudgingly walk up to the seventh person, right? So like, just remember kind of how you're showing up, and like in terms of that curiosity piece, are you genuinely interested in wanting to interact with this person? If not, it probably does show up.
Yeah, I think you both make such wonderful points. And just to kind of piggyback on that, on the authenticity and just genuine curiosity, is like, it's okay to show up as yourself. I think sometimes we think there's a formula, I need to act this way, ask the specific question, or show up in such and such way. And I think the genuine interest comes across when you are just who you are. Obviously, be professional in a professional environment, but I think there's something to allowing yourself to be natural, and then it comes across as such. It makes it easier to connect with people, so you don't have a wall up and then they don't have a wall up either.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think when I was at the Churn Zero conference 2 weeks ago and just doing in-person networking, I think for me it's always like, and this might not be anybody, but if you're just very well, let me back up. I always tell people that there's two things that people look for to build rapport, and that is one, warmth, and then two, trust. So like that's kind of the equation in my mind is warmth plus trust equals like rapport, right? And so people are able to judge you like, is this person like, do I like this person? Do I get along with this person? And I think humor is always a good way to go, unless you're not funny, in which please don't do it. You might be funny looking like me, and that might not get you much, very very far. But like just being warm and approachable, and like Chris said, I always tell people the best networking strategy is be interested in other people, right? Just be interested, and then about them. And I had a coaching client who is going to a in-person event, I think sometime soon, and he just asked me, he's like, should I let people know that I'm looking for a job? I'm like, bro, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It doesn't have to be like right off the bat, right? But that's what I mean is like, let this naturally unfold, right? So when people ask, when you're generally asking about them and you're interested in them, hopefully at some point, because people are brought up and raised right, they're like, so what's your name? What are you doing here? Right. And it's just like, you just tell them like, oh, I'm looking for my next position. I thought this would be a great networking opportunity, because generally people want to be helpful, and generally people are in good mood because a lot of the food is actually pretty good, especially in New York. At the conventions in New York, which, not to circle all the way back to that food conversation, but when I was in New York and I was like, hey, where should I go to eat? I asked a native New Yorker, and her brain just like exploded. She's like, what? I mean, I can't even compute that question, because you have to have more, there has to be more filters selected for me to give you a recommendation. But Yeah, no, I think it's just kind of be yourself, and if yourself naturally isn't a good person, then be someone else. But
Well, Brad, like going back to the job seeker that you were talking about, I mean, I think what people forget is when you're looking for a job, remember that hiring managers are looking for help on their team, right? So it's
Mhm.
not that you're asking for a favor, right? You're coming to a mutual agreement that, you want to do this thing and we need help doing this thing, right? And so that's why I think positioning it also as like, here's how I can help your team or here's how I can help your mission is also great. I mean, during COVID, when no one was going anywhere, I just cold messaged somebody on LinkedIn and said, I saw this posting and I think based on my background in this and this, I would be awesome at doing this for you and helping you succeed. Right.
mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's as simple as that. Like, this is how I can help you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think sometimes people try to overcomplicate it, but I don't know. It's something that I've taken for granted as a pure extrovert and someone who really enjoys people, right? And just being interested in other people is really helpful. But you do want to let you do want people to know that you are looking for another job, because every conference I've been to, I've had people come to me and say, Brad, I'm hiring for X. Do you know anybody? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, I do. I know lots of people, right? And so you have to, if you want to win the game, you got to be in the game, right? So
Mm.
you have to play the game.
100%.
So cool. All right. So let's move on to the next question, which has to do with interviews. We talked a little bit about interviews so far, but I actually want to I want to ask this question of like, tell us about an in-person interview and what immediately disqualified a candidate. So sometimes we hear a lot of things like to do, but just again, the benefit of this show is we have 3 hiring managers, lots of experience, and like, is there one or two things that you've been in an interview, it's like, okay, this is not going well? Because I know I have 1,200, but I'll limit it to just one or two. Okay, I'll go first.
I have a couple, but go ahead, Brad.
Okay. No, so I think one is make sure that when you show up, that you're not trying to read off of like a script, right? When I say tell me about yourself, I don't want you to be reading. I don't care how smooth you think you are at like your papers set up right here. You're an expert teleprompter reader. My name is Brad Davis, and I have 10 years of experience in like, it's robotic, it's not personal, and I want to get to know the real person behind you. And so I'm not a big fan of scripted tell me about yourselves, and so that's number one for me. And then number two is just making sure when you ask questions, like when there's that natural like questions have come up, that they're not just boilerplate questions that you can find online, right? Which is like, tell me about, what size is your company? Well, I mean, the job description said exactly what size the company was, right? So actually asking thoughtful questions based off the conversation we had. And I think the questions part, I think Chris talked a little bit about this, of just being naturally curious, but I think questions actually is one of the biggest ways that you can shine as a candidate, by asking really insightful and thoughtful questions. And I feel like there's been a number of candidates where they've interviewed fine, and then we get to the questions part, and I'm just like, that was just deflating. It's like, it's been such a great conversation, and then they ask these like really deflating questions, and I think it affected my judgment and how they did. So those are just two for me.
So in the spirit of do nots, I think this is relevant for in-person or Zoom interviews. I mean, I tend to do a lot of remote hiring too. I think a lot of us ask that initial question of like, tell me a little bit about yourself. Having that go on for more than 2 minutes is kind of a showstopper, right? So I've had them last as much as 15 minutes, and I was like, okay, I just wanted to see how far it would go.
I had one interview that lasted the whole time. It was the whole thing. It was tell me about yourself. It lasted the whole time. So I got you beat. Not to compare, but I'm going to.
Well, you win, but or did you win? Right? Like you don't want to spend the entire interview talking about like that. Tell me about yourself question. And then the other thing that's happened more than once is like when you start to name your conditions, assuming you've got the offer and the role, like, oh, I can't work past this time, or I can't do this or that. A lot of that kind of that should have gotten covered in the phone screen, or those are terms you cover once you've got the offer in hand, right? Then you're in the negotiating seat and you can start to kind of name your wish list. But I think starting to talk about it in the interview process, just that isn't the space or forum for that.
Good.
Yeah, I also think that's like a lost opportunity too, right? Like it's not, if you're asking those questions when you could be showcasing what you would bring, like it's kind of just a missed chance for you. I think the thing that I would add as well is, and this should go without saying, but you'd be surprised, is like not doing your research. Like it's very clear if you show up and you've even gotten through like a few rounds of interviews or you're at a project phase, if you have not done your research on the company, on the project, on the industry, or you don't know your stuff, like I think that comes across more than like it's too hard to hide that. And so it's really important to do that research. And I think a nice touch, I know this is a do and not a don't, but like the opposite of this is like look into the people that are interviewing you. If you can say, I noticed recently you were talking about this or something, to kind of weave it in and use their names and talk about things they might be working on, as much as you can know without working there. I think it's helpful, and it makes you memorable as a candidate as well.
Yeah, I agree with everything. I think the only thing I'll sort of double down on a couple of things, like make sure you do your research. Like it's a competitive market, right? You're going to be going up against people who can do the customer success role. Fine. Like there yes, there's a lot of like do nots. You're gonna run into the folks who like aren't show up late, or aren't dressed appropriately, or whatever it may be, right? Like those things are sort of like, I'm not even gonna go there, because you're gonna be going up against people who are gonna be that way, and so they're just you're gonna be immediately disqualified. But I think where the differentiation is like the people who are differentiating themselves today are the ones who can solve the problem for that specific business in that specific market, right? And if you don't have that exact experience in that market and that business with that type of product, you're already at a disadvantage, because there's likely candidates that have that. So you're gonna need to study up on that stuff if you're getting into these interview processes, because like those tend to be the differentiators, not the fact that like someone knows how to be a CSM or has 2 or 3, 5 years as a CSM. Like those things are all table stakes at this point. And so it's really important that you show that how your specific experience is going to like parlay really nicely into the exact industry and market and customer base that you're going to be engaging with at that business.
Cool. Chetna has a question. There's multiple rounds. Interviewers ask similar questions. How do you resolve conflict, for example? How do we repeat the stories or tell a different story to each interviewer in different rounds? So, I mean, I'll just jump in first. I think it's fine if you're in different rounds, different interviews, to tell the same story. In fact, I think it sometimes is beneficial so that people have, because a lot of time they take notes and they're like, hey, was that the same story as you heard? And if it was, I mean, that's good. But feel free to share different stories if you have multiple stories, right? But what I tell people is in interview technique, so like in my coaching practice, I have basically 3 funnels: landing more interviews, moving on in interviews, and landing offers. So this tier 2 of moving on in interviews, like the interview technique is the greatest variability. Because like Chris said, there's a lot of people who have the table stakes of you meet the job qualifications for, hey, you got 3 years of being a CSM, you've done the B2B SaaS, maybe you've even had some leadership experience, but how you actually interview and the techniques and then how you present yourself during the interview is the biggest form of variability. In my experience, I have people who look amazing on paper, and then when they get into the interview, it's underwhelming. And then there's people who you're like, oh, I'll maybe give this a shot, very little expectation, and then they're like, wow, this person's amazing. So I feel like the interview technique is is incredibly important. And so that question of, do you repeat the stories you have? Like, he or she that tells really compelling stories is going to move on. And so if you have really compelling stories, feel free to share multiple ones, but otherwise, stick to what works. And if that worked in that first round, that interview, and then you moved on, I would say it's fine to share it in the next round with someone different.
I think the only thing I'll add to that, Brad, I agree 100%. But know your audience, right? You may think it's a similar question, but if a sales leader is asking you that versus a product leader, they may care about two completely different things, right? And I'm not saying that the story may not be, but you just know who you're talking to and what they may care about, right? And the type of things that they're responsible for in the business, right? And make sure you're sort of tailoring the, maybe the punchline or whatever it may be of that story more towards that, what they care about versus, you know what I mean? So like, those are the types of things, like you may hear the exact same question from two different people who may have two different expectations of an answer depending on where they sit in the business.
Absolutely agree with Chris. So I also think it doesn't hurt to have like 2 or 3 scenarios or examples bulleted out for these, because a lot of interviewers for these types of questions will ask the same questions anyway, right? A time where you were successful, a time where you faced conflict in the workplace, right? So it doesn't hurt to just have a few. And then to Chris's point, before each interview, you're prepping for it anyway, so you can tailor and personalize to the person you're meeting with next.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the thread here that everyone is discussing is that storytelling piece. So if you're just really good at telling your story and you have those, 3 or 4 examples in your mind, as these questions come up, you're going to know kind of which one to pick and how to tell it, because you're getting so good at telling that story, and like practice it in the effort of not reading off a script. Brad, to your point, at any point in the interview, like I think getting really good at saying it out loud, at practicing. Like I've seen people record themselves on Zoom and tell their story and then listen back and see what it sounds like. And so as long as you're good at telling it, I think that's what's going to matter. And so it's okay if it's the same and it's tailored to your audience. You're good, as Chris and Rosalind mentioned.
The underlying thread that everyone's looking for when you're a hiring manager in an interview is, did this person put in effort, right? Are they making the effort to show up here well, right? And that's almost an indication of they're going to provide that effort, right? And try once they're in the job itself. So that's sort of the underlying theme that we're getting to.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I just try to tell people, like, the effort is like part of the interview process. Like we're trying to sort through like who's putting in, effort, because we want people to put in effort if they're potentially hired, right? So it's a sorting mechanism. Cool. So hold on, there's another comment that came in here. Let's see here. Okay. Chetna says thank you. All right. All right, we'll tackle this one. Marquita, hopefully I'm saying that right. She says, why do we see limited efforts to tap into the talent pool here in Barbados, particularly for remote roles, with so many skilled professionals eager to work remotely? What can be done to bridge this gap to bring more opportunities to talent in Barbados? It may not be me first, but we have lots of talent. Yeah, I think that's a great question, but Barbados specifically is that country. But I think maybe more remote work, right? I think the spirit of her question is perhaps how can more offshore people have opportunities in the CS workspace, right? Do we see companies that are doing that? I mean, I've seen that before.
I think previously, however, the trend, especially in the last year, has been a shift away from remote work, right? And more folks being in the office in a lot of industries. And so I think that's a pressure we're all facing. So I can speak for my organization and hiring. We're looking to tie a lot of new hires to office locations as well, promote more of a hybrid work environment. So these are mandates that are dictated to us, right? And ones that we kind of have to follow depending on the size of your organization. I do think that there are others that have more flexibility. So Melissa, Chris, Brad, I'm not sure what you've seen.
Yeah, I can chime in quickly. Oh, sorry, Chris. I keep talking over
please.
you.
No, all good. Go for it. You get to go this time.
No, I think, Rosalind, you're right. We are seeing that trend, and it might be why this question was asked in the first place, and that we are moving to kind of more of this hybrid world. I think what I have seen, though, is knowing where to look for those remote roles. So, like, if there are specific job boards or things like that that are remote first, or if you're putting on your notifications, like just tips and tricks there of like really focusing in that space. If you know that that's your, only option, depending on what you want to do, and if you can be remote or not. I think that's the trend that I've seen people trying to go to when they're in this situation. But I think working within that world, don't focus on those jobs that are hybrid. We know that there are a lot of companies that are doing that right now, but I think I've also seen, and specifically in smaller startups, a lot of the times they're a little bit more flexible. So sometimes they have more flexible policies. So I'd recommend kind of trying to look into maybe companies that have, are in an earlier stage or have fewer employees, because they tend to have a little bit more flexibility than some of these larger organizations. But Chris, back over to you.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I'll add is like, and this is I'm not going to say that this is fair, right? But like, there are a lot of legalities and political things that happen when you start looking at U.S. based companies looking into different offshore employment, right? There's tax stuff. There's there's scrutiny from the government. There's just I'm not saying that it's fair. I'm not saying that it's right. I'm not saying that there isn't an abundance of talent in any of these sort of offshore locations. But when a company has the when a company is looking at, hiring sort of onshore versus offshore and the risk that may be associated with that, sometimes they choose to continue to stay onshore because of that, right? And it's not every company, not every situation, but you have to understand that like sometimes it's not actually a talent thing, and it's just like something that is actually out of the control of the people who are living in those areas. And again, not saying it's right. I'm just saying that that's the reality that a lot of these businesses are facing. And but yeah, I mean, I think that's the plus the hybrid stuff is just really, there is a lot more mandates to come back into office locations, which is stuff.
Yeah. Which, I mean, if they want me, you want me. Sorry, Cincinnati is not a huge tech
Yeah.
hub, so I'm remote. I'm not moving. So, because I'm a townie. But anyways, I don't know. To be honest though, I think it's harder. Like, if you don't have as much experience, right? You're just trying to break in. You don't have that negotiating power. But if you're someone who's being sought after,
Yes.
then you have a little bit more opportunity, right? Where so I always just say too is like, especially if you're looking to break into customer success, like do what you need to do in terms of making sure you get an education, find a mentor. There's a lot of communities that you can do free work for. There's tons of CS communities, and you get involved with those people, and you'll meet a lot of really great people. So it's another form of networking. But find a community that you enjoy, right, and that you can get involved with. Because if you're trying to break into customer success, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend right now, because it's already hard for the people that were here. But yeah, you have to get to know people, because people is ultimately the best way to find your next position. So let's end with one more question here. If you had to give people looking for a job right now one bit of advice, like you can either say what would that piece of advice be, or what made someone very memorable, whether it was in a job interview or someone that you had been interviewing before. Like, what makes a candidate memorable, or what type of advice would you give a job seeker right now based on what's going on?
I can start here. I think like the piece of advice that I would give, I think I've given enough on like what I look for in candidates. I think the advice that I would give is, and this is so hard to do because I'm not in this situation, and like I have empathy for folks who have applied for hundreds of jobs and been denied a lot of them. But be as true to yourself as you can be, right? Don't get too caught up in the like I need this thing to be this way, and if it's not this way, that's why I didn't get the job. And even if you get feedback from certain people um, about X, Y, and Z, like this was why you didn't get this job, that doesn't always mean that that's what the next hiring manager is looking for. And so you can kind of, in this world where there's a lot of folks being denied roles, like you can sort of overthink and over like correct, and
Mhm.
actually, to the detriment of your next conversation, where like you could have gotten that job if there was two customer success manager jobs open, which there was 2 years ago, right?
Mm.
And like instead now you're trying to overcorrect and thinking overthink what you did wrong and trying
Yeah.
to change that about yourself. Like just don't, just be, try to be as true to yourself. Again, it's easy for me to say sitting in a role, right? But that's the advice that I would try to give.
Cool.
For me, I would say how you kind of show up in the beginning really matters. So with your resume, as people are looking at a number of resumes, the beginning stands out. So I would have your role, your company, your first two bullets should be really solid, right? In terms of this is what I did, this is how I helped this program, and having numbers and metrics in there. And then in the interview itself, those first few minutes, you want to start really strong because that's going to set the tone for the rest of the interview. So, and that's going to give you that confidence in the rest of the interview as well, right? So, having, I think, those two pieces, like beginning of your resume, beginning of your interview, be really strong is going to help you succeed.
Yeah, I love that advice. And I think just to be real about the reality we're in, people are hearing a lot of no's right now. And I don't think that's necessarily going to change right away. And I think having the mindset of like, it's a not right now. Like to Chris's point, there used to be like maybe two roles at the same time, but maybe there's another role in a few months. Like I think you should always make sure that you're nurturing those relationships and those experiences, even if it's a not right now. And even for me personally and my story, this has happened to me a couple of times in roles that I eventually ended up getting, even here at Chief. And so I think making sure that you are treating it as a redirection and keeping in touch with that person, going back to being genuine and organically engaging with people, like catch up with that person in a couple of months, comment on their LinkedIn. Like I think treating it as a constant sort of stream of relationship building in every process can be really helpful, because we have to be real about the fact that there is a lot of not right nows for a lot of people right now. And so how do you navigate that in this current climate?
So two great points. One, Rosalind brought up, which is the resume. The beginning part of your resume is super important, because it's basically, I tell people, it's an invitation for me to keep going. Like if your resume is super hard to read, there's like graphic 101, using white space, making it simple for people to read. You want to make sure that it's inviting to read, and then the parts that they're reading, is it even interesting? Because I always tell people, if you have a professional summary and I'm reading results driven in the very first like 5 words, it's like a copy and paste. Like we want to be, you want to make it to where it's not, it's about you, right? It tells me more about you. It's not like a copy and paste chat GPT, where it's boilerplate. And then what Melissa said, um, is super important when it comes to being, no, not right now. I think so many people, when they're quote unquote networking for people, or they're trying to network with people, like when I was hiring last year, I mean, I had 2 positions I was hiring for. And I'm someone who posts quite frequently on LinkedIn, even like back then. Uh, I posted exactly what I was looking for, I mean, but how many people actually went to my profile, looked through my content? Like there's just Easter eggs all over the place, right? So that's the thing, is if you know who you're going to interview with, like look at their LinkedIn profile. If there's someone that posts all the time, you know their interests, you know what they're looking for, you know their preferences, right, on what they're looking for in a CS job. And I think like, yeah, it's just, that's a gift, right? So just, and then no right now means like, okay, be able to take a no, but then just, reach out and keep that warm in case things change. So alrighty, well, we have reached time, but it's been a good discussion, and thank you panel for coming on. And Melissa, Chris, Rosalind, where can people connect with you at? Do you want to pitch anything you want to pitch? Your next ebook, anything, or just where can people connect with you?
I can start. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the best place to reach me. I do tend to answer my DMs, so feel free to reach me there. And I'm always happy to help. And I know it's a tough market out there. So if people need advice or anything like that, I'm always really happy to give back to the community.
Ditto, I second that. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, third, same.
Awesome. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much, panel, for coming on. Again, I always get like messages and, hey, I loved what Chris or Melissa or Rosalind said. And there's always lots of love. And I hope that some of that love reaches to your DMs as well, too, because people really do appreciate you guys taking the time to come on and share your thoughts and opinions, because it's doing a great service to people. So everyone, have a great weekend. Everyone recover from their sugar coma by adding upon that coma, whatever it is that you're going to do this weekend. And we'll see you guys next week. And so thanks, panel, for coming on.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.